At Startup Grind, we have 3 core beliefs. We believe in making friends, not contacts, in giving, not taking, and helping others before helping yourself. Today, we will have a conversation with Ilias for around 45 minutes, and we will leave 10 minutes at the end for the Q&A section. Don't hesitate to click on the Q&A tab located in the chat section to write down any questions you might have for Ilias. Before starting with Ilias and learning more about his journey, we would like to thank our ecosystem partners. Let's start with Bonjour Startup Montreal, which is in a way the cluster for the Montreal startup ecosystem, helping the creation, growth, and success of Montreal startups. Tomorrow at 2 p.m., they will be having another edition of their Mercredi Startup. And this week, they will be talking with the founder of Eli Health, Marina Pavlovich Rivas, and Kyle Boulet, who's co-founder of Buzz.com and entrepreneur in residence for Collectif Invincible, the new scale-up program developed in partnership with the BDC and the CDPQ. To get more information, you can visit their website, bonjourstartupmtl.ca. We're also partnered up with Montreal New Tech, which mission is to accelerate the tech startup ecosystem in Montreal. They are doing some really amazing things, and they host on their Facebook page the check-in on Fridays discussing the news in the Montreal startup ecosystem. If you haven't done so already, like their Facebook page, Montreal New Tech. They also have an ecosystem calendar on their website where all events related to the startup ecosystem in Montreal are available. Subscribe to their calendar and their newsletter by going on their website, montrealnewtech.com. Lastly, we would also like to thank EY for their support. EY is one of the largest professional firms in the world, providing assurance, tax, consulting, and advisory services to its clients. They love working with startups and have recently acquired a small accounting firm to better serve owner-managed businesses. They are used to working with early stage to growth stage companies and provide services tailored to the needs of startups. If you have any questions, you can contact directly Nassim Ben Nasser, who's going to be attending also this event. Now, allow me to provide you a quick introduction on today's guest. Who doesn't know Ilias? This is a question that is often asked when someone's asking about Ilias. Seriously, I can't count the number of times I've heard that statement when talking with people involved in the startup ecosystem. Driven by fair and meaningful tech and science-based strategic open innovation, Ilias believes strongly in the success of the startup ecosystem to accelerate the advancement and innovation within larger organizations and societies at large. He's co-founder of Montreal New Tech and works for Desjardins in the open innovation team. And you probably saw him recently on Facebook while promoting and presenting in the Coopératon, the largest open innovation challenge in the world. Ilias, thank you for accepting our invitation.
It's a pleasure. Thank you very, very much, Cedric. It's an honor and a pleasure to be with you. And thanks for organizing this. I think we're all talking about ecosystems, but behind it, it's a lot of people such as yourself who are tirelessly contributing and contributing in building it. So thank you for taking the time. I know you're super busy with work as well, you and Mazen. So thanks for taking the time to maintain and grow the Startup Grind community here in Montreal.
Thank you, Ilias. Thank you, Ilias. So let's start quickly with your background, if you can. Tell us a bit about your journey that led you from Morocco to Montreal and your early start here in the city.
Sure. Well, first, sorry for the background, but you know, COVID situation, we do with what we can, and I don't have such a crispy background as yourself. So my name is Ilias. I'm born and raised in Morocco until for my studies. I actually went to France for a little glimpse before coming to Montreal. I was really inspired by the multicultural aspect of Montreal itself, as well as the power of the educational system here. The fact that Montreal was such a large university city, I think the second in North America or something like that, as well as the innovative research centers, etc., that were here. Really cool for the government to support research, innovation, as well as entrepreneurship. And I was always like a techie at heart, you know, like I liked programming when I was like 14, 15, when like, you know, it wasn't super sexy at that time, but still, I love technology. I built my first websites, as well as built platform actually to bring communities on PHP 3 back in the days before you had like a bunch of frameworks, etc., etc., etc. How I joined actually the tech ecosystem here in Montreal was kind of like almost by chance. I always liked helping people in a way, and I don't mean that in an arrogant way, but we launched Action Bénévole Communautaire, nonprofit, joined ISEC, which is a large nonprofit as well. And with time, I really enjoyed and seeing like bringing people together, creating value to the ecosystem where they are. And I really enjoyed it both, when you give, you get more than what you expect. That's something that I truly believe. And I realized with time that actually that tech aspects came back biting me. And I started realizing that, for example, in university, you don't have career fairs for entrepreneurs at that time. You had for large organizations, and I have nothing against EY, PwC, Deloitte, and all the IBMs of this world. Great, but they have a budget. They come in universities and they hire people there. They have the means to have like career fairs there, etc. And I was always felt like bad for the startups or the entrepreneurs who also needed talent. And I'm talking about a decade ago, 2008, 2007, more actually than a decade. But jokes aside, and I felt bad for that. So I kind of like tried to bring startups within my university, and it was a hard thing. It was a really un chemin de croix, as we say here in French. So I kind of like fought at that time, and I realized that for large organizations, it was about $1,000 to spend there 2 days. For smaller ones, there was nothing. So I fought to have it for about $100 at that time for a startup, and realizing with time that a startup or an entrepreneur wanted commercialization, wanted to have their word out, needed like beta testers, people to use their products, etc., etc. And I stumbled upon a meetup, Montreal New Tech at that time. That was a little meetup held in bars, etc. And I loved the vibe of the community, but I wanted to do more. And I believe that my kind of like little drive and energy could contribute. So I joined as a volunteer, and I haven't left since then. And we grew. We've done a bunch of things throughout, and I'm really grateful for this opportunity and continuing in it.
So how did that happen? So you got involved in 2011, I think, in Montreal New Tech. Exactly. You just reached out to them, like how did that happen?
Oh, this is one of the beauty of such an ecosystem. It's very welcoming. Like people are there to actually get shit done. They're not like the BS with the cravat and the cocktail. Now it's changing a bit. We can talk about that afterwards. But basically, like people needed help, and I wanted to contribute. I wanted to give a hand, so I joined. It was Harry and a bunch of other people organizing this and like carrying beers, going to the bars, and then like going to places. One of the first places where we went was Soundtech, an incubator here in Montreal, then District 3 and the others that were launching along the ways, and bringing really the communities. And I think like what was really interesting at that time was really to bring this kind of like voice, as well as really at the crossroad of both tech as well as the human aspect of being able to build trust among each other. And from there, like we did a bunch of hackathons, career fairs for startups. Even when universities weren't super collaborating, we rented the space and we did our own career fair without the universities supporting us at that time. A bunch of demo days. I think like the core of Montreal New Tech was and still will be showcasing technology, showcasing innovation, etc. And the demo nights of Montreal New Tech became like a kind of like a famous thing. We realized that like the organization or like the ecosystem needed information. So that was more like 2012, 2013. So we started with the newsletter, the calendar, that became kind of like the big thing where everybody just like drop by and get to know what's happening, basically, like the information aspect. Then 2012, 2013, well, actually 2011 was also the fundraising for Natman House. So we had, it was led by also like Osmo Foundation, Harry and others. And we raised 100K on Indiegogo at that time. It wasn't an easy feat. And as, Founder Fuel started, accelerators, kind of like Montreal became a bit more bubbly in a way. And thanks for the Osmo Foundation for that, actually. Alan and John Stokes and Sid Dankar and a whole bunch of others. Sorry if I didn't name all of them. And then we realized that like incubators were starting and we wanted to contribute to that as well. We collaborated with the first ones, had tipped to District 3, that really led the kind of like incubator movement with an appetite to break silos. So it wasn't just dedicated to the university students of District of Concordia, but to the others. And it kind of like set things into motion into breaking silos. And I think one of the strengths of Montreal New Tech and the kind of like culture that I was able to instill and maintain was really to keep one forward thinking around technology, really being helpful and giving first kind of like attitude without necessarily expecting stuff, but knowing that you'll get something in return. But third also was really about reaching out, breaking silos, forcing sometimes collaboration, but always with a smile. And that led us to some pretty good successes throughout time.
Yeah, well, I remember when the first Montreal New Tech event I attended was in 2015, and I think you had back then Stay 22, which was called Zilio, I think back then. There was also Ipana, etc. So it was really the first event that I attended with the startup ecosystem. And back then, your events were a bit more like some kind of a demo day where startups would come, talk about themselves, and then you'd have the audience asking them questions, etc. And I think around 3 years ago, maybe, you guys pivoted a bit in your events, in the way you're doing things, to focus more on open innovation. How did that, the word that we love using in the startup ecosystem, pivot? How did that pivot happen internally at Montreal New Tech?
Absolutely. So I think, you know, I'm lucky to be able to have purpose in my life, or at least like be able to do what I like and be able to kind of like move forward in it. And I think the moment the pivot happened was like, as we saw the ecosystem growing, we saw the multiplicity of players. And I'm always thinking about like, how can we bring value? How can we truly bring value? Like, let's move away from just the show, and let's move away from just like being there to kind of like stay put in our successes, because we were and we still are in a certain way successful into like being part of the ecosystem, contributing to its buildup. But we realized that like there was some things lacking, and I love the example of the 2015 example, because at that time, like without diving into too much detail, like I'm not sure like everybody would be comfortable in that part, but like one of the founders of the startup came and he literally just said, I had 1 month runaway, I'm going to close my business. You invited me 2 months ago, it was going okay, but now it's shit show, and I'm going to close my business. And I realized that like many startup founders are product driven. They want to contribute to society, they want to bring value, but they want to build stuff. They don't necessarily have the capacity to build businesses or to sell or to present. And they're lacking a bunch of things there. And I realized that maybe if I contribute, and I actually joined and helped that startup pivot itself and move them from a B2C model to a B2B2B model. And from there, it actually went pretty well, and it's still going fairly well today. And I realized that like that need to have someone or to have an organization that supports from the early stage the right collaboration between other organizations that can be not only clients, but also partners is becoming more important than ever. So you can come and market and sell your things, but what if from the get-go you were able to get a partner to support you and also be a buyer? And what was really interesting there, it was the ability for us in a way to create this space in time and physically, where we were able to bring multiple stakeholders and create trust and relationships and engagements between them. And actually thanks to you and like in your previous jobs as well, where we realized like VCs were there, corporations were asking questions of like, how can we work with those startups? Like what's going on there? They are innovative, we are slow, etc. They're agile, but like it was almost like two worlds speaking different languages. And we realized that we created that space for collisions to happen in a way. And that's where kind of like that realization happened. The second part was also like, we suck. We really suck at commercializing IP. We're great at developing IP. We're great at funding research, but we still suck at commercializing it. So what if we could help instill the entrepreneurship mindset into researchers? And I had like few fights sometimes with the leading researchers, I'm not going to name them, where we were asking them to push a bit further to help us contribute into this commercialization. The other one was also like a business moment that I realized that Large organizations are built to maintain trust. They have trust, they're built to maintain it. Startups don't have trust and want to get it. But large organizations are meant to keep that trust with their clients, their partners, etc. And there is the paradox between the action and being frozen into that kind of like, oh, we have to maintain the status quo because we want to keep that trust. Because change creates the risk of losing that trust. So really the frozen action paradox of embracing change as well as maintaining trust became more apparent than ever. And finally, there is the kind of like personalization on my end was like, I realized that I was a bit weird as an individual, and I always thought that it was a flaw to lack focus, to bring multiple people together, to like multiple projects, etc. And I realized that it's actually okay and potentially also like a natural strength to be able to kind of like be multimodal, speak to different people and actually be able to understand them all, from a developer to a business person to a CEO. And I tried working on that strength, and that's where the kind of like pivot happened.
And what kind of benefits did you see for those startups? So you're talking about how you saw that the evolution of the ecosystem meant that, okay, there's enough places where startups can pitch, can promote themselves, but now let's concentrate on open innovation. What has been the benefits that you've seen since you guys have pivoted?
So in a clear way, the main benefit for a startup when we talk about open innovation are threefold. One, if you see it like it's all about equilibrium. Like if you want to build a meaningful relationship, yes, you have to be generous, but you have to create a balance between both. So if you take like a large organization and a startup, what we realized with time, the benefits are very clear, as long as expectations are at the right level. And we can talk about expectations later. But the benefit directly for a startup is one, they are able to build trust from the get-go. So working with large organization that is established, that has trust, this trust can be transferred to the other. And we have tangible examples, for example, with Data Performers, a leading AI startup today that when their first client, or their first Canadian client, because they had one client in the US before Canada, which is and another paradox that we can talk about, their first client, a leading financial institution, Desjardins, not to name it, became their first, the day that Desjardins became their first client, they transferred that trust to them. It's like a resume. When you have Desjardins on your startup resume from the get-go and you still almost don't have a product and have the technology but not the product, that's a great win. And you can take that to get next clients. So one, you build trust faster. Second, subject matter expertise. So through a large organization, you can get people, experts, subject matter experts, without having to have them on the payroll. And actually, you're being paid by the large organization to host those experts on your board or on your team, which is a fantastic thing if you think about it. And third is also money. Like obviously, having a smaller amount of money is an amount of money at the beginning is kind of like l'argent c'est le nerf de la guerre. So it's a key aspect. So one, trust on your CV. Second, subject matter experts without the payroll. And third, money. That's for the startup. But as I said, it's all about balance, and you have to design it so that it's successful by design. So on the company part, and that's where we kind of like come as well to help, is for the company, they get the agility without the risk. So they have a partner, a startup that has a forward-thinking technology, has more embrace for risk, as well as the agility for it. A large organization, as I just said, a large organization in general have like a risk management antibodies in a way. So you outsource that risk in a way. Second, on the monetary part, not everybody can pay large amounts of money to a beautiful, amazing, awesome consulting firm to do some tests and embrace failure. But at the same time, nobody gets fired for hiring IBM. So finding that balance where you find the amount of money that the startup is hungry for, and they really would take it, not necessarily a consulting firm. They have the agility, not necessarily a large one, etc., and they embrace that. So on the monetary part, it's less money than you would expect. And third, it's also about transfer of knowledge. So you actually can co-create that product. You can co-create a product from the get-go with the startup. That is the key element, because if you think about it, and we can dive deeper into that, but if you think about it, a startup that is established, that has a product already established, has to crystallize that product and scale and sell it to as many people as they can or as many corporations as they can. But a more nimble startup that has a great team, but not necessarily already a product, well, it's like bread. It's like a dough. You can still like arrange it in such a way that it actually answers your need and not having to adapt yourself to the product at hand.
And so was that one of the main challenges you would say that these startups have? So you mentioned money, of course, it helps, but what other challenges you guys, these startups were facing?
That's a great question. I think one of the first challenge, and this is like a key aspect, is like opening the door. It sucks. I would love that we would teach our startups better ways to do B2B sales or like relationship sales, but opening the door is really hard. And that's where having a partner opening the door for them, having someone who already the large organization trusts to open that door for them is great. Second, and this is something that I will tell any entrepreneur in the room, stop bullshitting people, please. That's actually one of the challenges. And I'll tell you why. So many times we brought a startup that was overselling and under-delivering. That's not how it works. So imagine I open the door for you. I'll let you in. I invite you in. You have a dinner, and then you start bullshitting the person. That doesn't work. And I really believe that having kind of like this equilibrium of trust is really key. And that was one of the challenges. I would say the third one is really about on the large organization side. It's about designing success, or what I call like building a project with manufactured success from the get-go. And what I mean by that is, again, nobody gets fired for hiring IBM. So for a manager, like put yourself in a manager's shoe. So let's say, hey, Cedric, you're the manager of a large organization. My name is Ilias. I bring you a startup. You talk with them. You're like, yeah, I would love to, but dude, like I'm working and like I need to convince my boss, to convince the others. Like, what's this person? So one of the challenges is really finding the first successes to make sure that you look good, that the manager looks good in front of their bosses, so that instead of working with a small budget, for example, what you realize that most of the time for a small pilot project is between $25,000 and $75,000, then you get the first success there, and then you can get the ball rolling. And that's an amazing way to actually circumvent this famous quote about IBM. Not that we don't like them, we love IBM as well, but you know what I mean.
So you mentioned it a few times now, the Desjardins brand comes up. Obviously, you work for them. They're heavily involved in the startup ecosystem it's been a few years now. They have different initiatives like the Desjardins Lab, Coopératon, the Startup in Residence also program that you've mentioned. Some of the startups have benefited from. It's great to see, honestly, from the outside, a big player like that get involved in the startup scene and put skin in the game, like they say, right? But on Desjardins' side, what has been the benefit so far? So it's been a few years that they're having all these initiatives. What are the benefits that you're seeing? What could attract other big companies, enterprises to commit also the way Desjardins has been committing?
Sure. So if I may, before like diving into the benefits, I would just like, and I don't mean it as like just being nice to Desjardins, but highlighting a unique aspect. And I think that is one of the key values of our ecosystem as well. And that's one of the reasons why I joined Desjardins in beginning of 2016. We had the opportunity to work at Montreal New Tech and Desjardins on a hackathon, actually, when I had the opportunity to work with Desjardins before on an innovation pipeline back in 2012, 2013, making relationships there. And in 2015, they called me back to give a hand on the hackathon, and we started working there as well. I was an entrepreneur at that time, going through a rough patch with the partner there, so I gave them a hand a bit. And I realized that, like, and I want to highlight that aspect before moving forward, because it's important. Like, I think culture and values are key for open innovation and actually nurturing both the ecosystem and your organization as well. So again, like, it's a give first attitude without necessarily expecting from the get-go. That will give you way more back at the end. So it's a cooperative, and I say it in a very honest way. The values of a cooperative or a credit union of 120 years have at their core the values of open innovation that is really meaningful, sustainable, and multi multi-beneficial. And that's how I kind of like came in. When from the get-go they were like, you know what, like we want to launch this lab. We're not sure exactly how well we're going to do it. We know we have events. I think that you're pretty good at doing that kind of stuff. Can you help us out? I started with a few days a week. And the reason why I'm highlighting this again, because in case there is any large organization listening to us today, we are going to talk about the benefits. We're going to talk about where we are. But 4 years ago, the expectations were fairly low, sorry. And what I always say to my team, happiness is the difference between expectations and results. And that allowed us to go for a year or a year and a half without necessarily having like super high expectations, really creating that time and space where not only it was okay to try, but it was also okay to fail. And you need that from the get-go to be able to benefit down the road. So that's one. Second, it's the realization that complexity is growing, world challenges are growing, and incremental innovation is obsolete. And I think for a large organization to truly, even like a large one as Desjardins that has 50,000 employees, and like we are built as an organization to be incremental in our actions, again, to maintain trust with our end users. Because obviously, like a big bank or a big financial institution, what is their biggest asset? It's not the money they have in their offices or whatever. It's the trust they have with their user. The biggest asset of a large organization is the trust. But at the same time, you have this paradox of like incremental innovation is obsolete because the challenges of our society, our world that we're facing are growing and more complex as the day go. So you need to create that time and space where trying, failing, iterating, learning, a bit like in the startup mentality, is more important than ever. And we all realize that, and that's where it was an echo with our organization. We all realized that like we're not going to fight climate change with an app. We're not going to fight the largest challenges with just this kind of like mindset of like, yeah, just digital stuff. We need space for disruption, and creating that bubble where failure can happen was a key aspect. And again, I maintain that for our corporate listeners or watchers here, the expectation at that moment were fairly low. And my role within it was not only my role, our team role, because I would be very arrogant to say my role alone. But it was a great trust from our leader as well, Federico Puebla, who kind of like created that space where he was the gilet pare-balles. How do you say that in English?
Bulletproof vest.
Bulletproof vest. So he was a kind of like bulletproof vest for our little bubble where we were trying stuff, so that the antibodies of the organization weren't going through us. Because of course, we needed that space again to try and fail and iterate on it. So that aspect, plus adding like a small ability to iterate on it and grow new initiatives, allowed us to launch few stuff. So allow me to talk about few successes if you want.
Yes.
As you just said, well, few successes, it's an ongoing thing. You know, it's like a recipe. I love cooking, so you know, you open your fridge, you check what ingredients you have, and from there you build something, right? So it's like a recipe. Nothing is perfect yet. The day it will be perfect, we'll write a book or something like that, and even then, perfection is the horizon, so it's fine. So to go back to the point, from the get-go, and I used the example of data performance earlier, but imagine, and this is a concrete example for the people, imagine you're a large organization, you hear about AI, you hear about data sciences, and obviously like one of the great assets, there are also all the data you can leverage, develop algorithms around it, etc., etc. So we were looking for a solution. We went to the large organizations, and obviously like a consultant or whatnot, and we're working very well with consultants. We have great partners there, and we're really building an amazing infrastructure within. But one of the challenges is when you're trying something. So at that time, we were looking at startups, and most startups had already crystallized products. So it's a product, they want to scale it. Obviously, that's the role of a startup. So when you want to scale, you don't want those kind of like custom requests. And at the same time, if you want to try and fail and etc., you cannot go to a large organization and be like, hey, I have this small budget to try and fail because that's everything I can do. So from the get-go, we scouted for the right team and the team before the product that had a product around agriculture, data performers, amazing team, fantastic mindset, fantastic values, etc. A bunch of great scientists as well. And we thought about how can we actually transform a product that can work in agriculture into anticipating, projection, behavior, etc., and applying into humans and customers, etc.
Yeah.
And we're able to pivot that, and that's what I call manufacturing success. It was a small success, and it allowed us to launch the Startup in Residence program. Because from that first success, people in the higher-ups and reading the media and interacting with internally with the startup itself, they were like, wow, that works. Our first test was a success. And that's what allowed us to try new
stuff. But do you feel it's luck then? Because we all know open innovation involves failures.
Yeah.
So it's part of the game, right? It's part of incremental, it's part of growing, it's part of the collaboration part. There's a risk of failure. Do you feel like if the first test was not a success, or you don't want to think about it, but if it wasn't a success, do you think things would have been different?
100%, Cedric, 100%. And I think that's where like a little maturity in your behavior, depending on who you're talking to, and designing success from the get-go. Small success, you don't need like a huge one. Our goal wasn't like to build the biggest transformative, innovative, you name it, any buzzword you want to put in from the get-go. But we knew deep inside, and I don't want to go back to the 2012, 2013 experiment, but truth being said, it's about the maturity of the organization to allow that time and space for failure potentially. And we had few failures, but it was like small things that were still inside our bubble. And that's where like having a great boss, who is this kind of like bulletproof vest, who is this kind of like person who's going to go to the bat for you, for your team, go to their management and be like, hey, it's part of the game, and convince their higher ups that it's fine, but at the same time creating a space that it will not spill over the core businesses of the large organization. That was key. But you're absolutely right. If we tried a huge project and failed, that would be done for the lab at that time. And that's why we kind of like design it. And I think anyone who wants to be this intermediary, this glue between those two worlds, has to have the maturity to design things, to have small successes so that you get the ball rolling. Otherwise, it's naive. And I think this naivety is also one of why so many startups have a hard time getting large organization. And I think that's why today we talk about open innovation more than in 2013 when I was trying to promote it. It's because we're growing and we're losing this kind of like naivety to just be like, hey, startups are going to change the world. Of course they can. But doing it in a partnership with large organization that shared similar values is such a great lever to change actually the world.
And do you feel like and I don't want to grow your ego here, but do you feel like you guys have had a significant input? Because I did my master's thesis was also on open innovation ecosystems related to startups that are looking to expand and get connected. And most of the time, entrepreneurs don't have time necessarily to look at the big picture of all the players, whether it's co-opetition, co-design, etc., of products, of services. What do you think about that?
I think from like, are you talking about me as Ilias or me as Desjardins or me as Montreal New Tech?
However way you want it. What do you think in general about that?
I think great entrepreneurs do have to focus on their product. I think amazing entrepreneurs have this kind of like multi-model aspect where they can both focus on product and understand better their markets, etc. And that's why like we see so many great entrepreneurs actually who are usually like not a dropout from university as like the Zuckerberg of this world, but a dropout of a large business or a large organization. Because they are in this large organization, they realize that there is a flaw. They realize that like the l'engrenage or like it's built to like maintain the statu quo in a way or like incremental things. And they want to actually be disruptive. They try within the organization, they fail, and they're like, you know what, fuck that, I'm out. So we see that as well. What I believe in and what I think I humbly contributed a bit is to be able to grab those people. And I think we're not there yet, by the way. I think this is our next frontier. But it's to grab those entrepreneurial mindset. It's to grab those people within large organizations who have this expertise, who have the entrepreneurship mindset, the great values, and the hustle that they want to actually work hard and get shit done, and bring them closer to a kind of like entrepreneurial endeavor to be able to dream big, build a team, and develop that. But in that, I do believe that we need help. We need people who can take them by hand, connect them with the ecosystem, help them navigate that ecosystem. And the fun part, you know, we talk about de solitude in French. I'm sorry to drop some French here and there, but you know, we are from Montreal.
We're Montreal.
But it's two solitude. It's on one hand, you have like even an entrepreneur within a large organization who's completely oblivious to what's happening in their ecosystem. Even if they go to a 5 à 7 or like having a drink, etc., etc. And they are curious, they read a bit, but they still need like to embrace and be immersed in the ecosystem. On the other hand, you have like those large entrepreneurs or startups, etc., who may know more about the ecosystem but are completely oblivious to the rest. So I think like even like yourself with Startup Grind, Montreal New Tech, the Coopératon, and I would love to talk a bit about it. We create this time and space where we bring those different type of people to get to know each other, to break that kind of like solitudes, and to build trust and just engage and build hopefully relationship, so that down the road they can actually build something together, because they don't know it, or maybe they don't know it, but they should, but they know they need each other to be able to actually change the world.
Perfect. Now we're talking a bit more about startups. We've talked, it's been over 10 years that you're involved in the ecosystem, talking with startups, talking with entrepreneurs. What are the general advices that you give to, you find yourself, you're giving a lot to entrepreneurs. It's the same thing over and over again. Some of the advices that keep on coming back.
I will say a simple one. Stop bullshitting. We're not in the naive world anymore. And I know like it may be a bit rough, and I love entrepreneurs. I think like you know me how much I love entrepreneurs and startups. But please, you know, undersell and over-deliver. I've seen it, and unfortunately sometimes it happens again and again. That I think is a key aspect. The second one is really surround yourself with people who are better than yourself and complementary to your skill set. Again and again, I still see entrepreneurs who unfortunately think they can either do it on their own or think that they can surround themselves with like-minded people and get shit done. You do it at a small scale, but I think we need the maturity to actually look for people different than yourself. We're talking about diversity and inclusion as well, but it's key to have like these kind of like different skill sets. Third is truly know your market or know your partners. Don't have the arrogance of knowing what's going on out there, unless you, as I said earlier, you've been working in a large organization or something like that and you truly understand the problem. We still see entrepreneurs who are trying to tackle imaginary problems. And fourth, I would say, please, like the challenges ahead are so big. Try to tackle one of those challenges. We don't need like the next Uber for toilet paper because I need one now, or any other delivery or whatever app there. Those are like kind of like general advices. And I really believe, especially on the tackling large problems, I think the large problems that are ahead of us are so huge that whenever you think of a large problem, it means also a large business opportunity. Dream big. And I know it sounds like a very common sentence to say, but truly, like the next 10 years, we're going to see climate change or climate crisis becoming more prevalent than ever. If you are able to tackle such a problem or such a challenge, trust me, you'll be a billionaire. And those large challenges need to be tackled. We have an amazing opportunity today where large organizations are also understanding more and more that they need to collaborate with startups. It wasn't the case just like 10 years ago or even just 5 years ago. And I do believe that in the next 3 to 5 years, we're saying all organizations are going to have a lab. All organizations are going to do one way or the other something called open innovation or a variance of it. So you have those people or large organizations who want to embrace you. So take the time to get to know them. Take the time to tackle those large challenges. I think those aspects are going to be key. And of course, like anything, and you would bring any incubator accelerator here, they would talk about like validate from the get-go, work with the partner from the get-go to validate before like putting your heart and sweat in it. Be passionate about true problems that are actually solving something and not like imaginary ones. And things like that. I think this is important. And if I may, like for me, diversity and inclusion is so key. And I think it has like a huge value added. And even when we do something like Cooperaton, that in the middle of COVID and the crisis and everything, we're able like to virtualize everything and still keep the human touch. We are very proud that we had among the 1,500 participants, 40% of women, for example. And we work very hard to get that. We are proactive about it. And we can talk about that further if you want, but it's truly requiring proactivity, consciousness about it, and true actions, and leaving space for that as well to happen. Because it's stupid if you think about it. By default, skipping on half of the population or like doing little efforts for that, because a lot of innovation is happening there. A lot of innovation happens when you bring different people who think differently. You know, the famous think different? Dude, you have to do it consciously.
Thank you. Everyone, we've opened up the Q&A section in the chat. So if you go in the chat section, there's a tab Q&A if you want to start writing down your questions. Ilias, before we go back into a bit of a different subject, I want to approach you and say, well, one of the big challenges that I see also with startups is they don't know how to talk with large organizations. They don't know how to try to get that first client, and it's normal. You've talked about it. I've worked at EY also. It's tough. It's tough to sell for a big company because the big company also sees you as a big liability, as a big risk. What are your advices when an entrepreneur approaches you and wants advice on how to approach these bigger companies?
Speaking of advice, ask for advice, you'll get money, and ask for money, you'll get advice. So my first advice is don't ask for money. My first advice is don't go there to sell something. And I know it sounds simple or like easier said than done, but go there and ask for advice. Create a rapport, create a relationship. Be where the people you want to talk to are. I know it's harder during COVID, but actually it's easier. And I've met so many entrepreneurs throughout the last year that tell me, oh, it's so hard to network. Dude, like COVID. I'm like, no, you're crazy. It's quite the opposite. You can stay in your room, open a browser, and go around the world, network with people. You can, even on the Montreal New Tech side or like Cooperaton side, we did the largest Cooperaton ever. We did the largest creative collisions with the Montreal New Tech from coast to coast to coast. The reason why is because we're virtual. So for any entrepreneur out there, my piece of advice is know your industry, know the players you want to talk to, and build a rapport with them. Go to the conferences where they are. Now, I just checked like the Montreal New Tech calendar. There is probably like 40 events a week. Even right now, there is one on AgTech. There is huge things on AgTech going on. If you're thinking about that, like the Canadian Space Agency is doing things, Prompt is doing things, there is so much going on just here in Canada. So that would be my second one, is like be where your future clients or partners are. Third is surround yourself with true advisors or like people who actually care about you and care about your future and who can help you open that door. And it's like dating. This kind of relationship is really building a rapport with the larger organization is like dating. Sometimes having a wingman or a wingwoman can be very helpful to build that rapport with the larger organization. So potentially going and knocking at your door, Cedric, being like, hey, you seem to know a bunch of large organizations. Can you help me talk to this person? Is there any advice you give me to be able to talk to this or that person? I think that would be key. But I go back to one of the things that I said earlier as a third piece is don't bullshit, don't oversell. We are not in the naive world of like, hey, AI is going to solve everything. Or back in 2012, 2014, where people were like, hey, startups are going to take over the large organizations and like change them more, etc. No, now it's more like we're going back to some simple roots of like generosity thinking, really trying to grow the pie together. Things like actually that are very fundamental to humans. how we're able like to work together as a community to survive. You know, it's stupid to say, but like humanity has been able to survive because of communities. Because throughout time, we're able to come together and grow the pie together in a way.
Yeah.
So those aspects are key. I know it's simple things, but going back to simplicity sometimes is the most important part. So again, don't sell, rather build a rapport. Find yourself a wingman or a wingwoman to do so, and truly think of a true win-win relationship where you're growing the pie both for you and the others. And empathy is really key, so that you understand actually who you're talking to and how can your actions benefit them. How can you directly benefit the career of your interlocutor? That's the key thing. And lastly, start with small successes. Like get a first project, know their limits. So most of organizations, they have like a discretionary spending of $25,000 to $75,000 in a pilot or a POC. So know that information and build yourself or your project in such a way that you can get that first success through the door and make the manager proud. And then you'll get more business going on. So 5 simple advices that I hope that are useful.
So we'll jump right into a question that was just posted here. So for startups, what are the criteria for finding a suitable long-term corporate partner? I think you've mentioned that a bit in your speech now, but what are some red flags that you see about corporate partners there? There should be a no-go for an entrepreneur startup.
So I will ask you a question to answer this question. Are you talking about the red flag for the corporate partner as a corporate partner, or the red flag for the corporate partner regarding the startup? Is it for whom is it a red flag?
I think, and maybe that person can add to the question, but I think they mean this: the red flags for the startups looking at the corporate partner.
Okay. Oops. Sorry, I didn't. Well, I would say red flags for the startups. Okay, so I would say from a red flag perspective, one, don't waste your time, especially, and I would say it's in a nice way, but don't waste your time if you don't feel you're strategically aligned with the interests of the manager you're talking to. So if I'm a startup and I'm going to talk to you, Cedric, and like you're in a certain line of business, and I see that my startup doesn't really answer your needs or doesn't really help you, most people I know are very polite, especially here in Quebec, everybody's polite, that's great. But for a startup, like it's either you move forward or you move backward. There is no statu quo. And every day is a hustle. Every day it's either you grow or you shrink. There is no statu quo. For a large organization, statu quo is the statu quo. They're here for a while. So if you're just like a dossier on a pile, don't go ahead. That's a huge red flag, actually. And I've seen so many startups that I talk to who tell me, oh my God, I got this client. I'm like, okay, hold on. What's your relationship with this client? Oh, well, you know, we had like 4 or 5 meetings, etc. So I'm like, how are you advancing those meetings? What's going on? Oh, well, you know, there is this challenge or that challenge. And the relationship is not growing. The person doesn't help them navigate the ecosystem of the large organization. That's a huge red flag. If I'm talking to someone and you're not helping me navigate the ecosystem, if the next meeting I'm not growing up the ladder, then you're wasting your time. And the best entrepreneurs that I know actually are the ones who turn down meetings with large organizations where the right people are not around the table. Because then it's both a waste of your time and the time of the other. But you know what? The person working in the large organization, they have their paycheck. The person working in the large organization, they are being paid to take meetings, not you. You are paying to take that meeting, actually. Like every hour within a startup that you're not being productive and building your startup, you're losing money, whether you fund it or not. So that's for me the huge, huge, huge red flag. Politeness is a huge red flag. Getting shit done, sitting down with people who give you actionable items for the next step is a good one. Don't waste your time. I would say a second red flag, if you're talking, and I'm going to say it in all frankness, if you're talking to an innovation manager or a marketing manager or something like that without having a business line person at the same table, then you're just like, flattening your ego, his ego, or her ego, or whatever. and you're wasting time. This is a huge red flag as well, because some people are being paid to talk about innovation. I'm, in a certain extent, being paid to talk about innovation.
But it can be tricky for the startup, right? So they have that meeting with that company, and well, they can be saying, well, listen, it might be my way through the door, and maybe at some point he'll be able to introduce me to his boss and his boss's boss. So like, if you put yourself in the shoes of a startup, it's hard to reject the meeting and to say no.
Absolutely. But, well, dude, you have to learn to speak politely, right? You have to learn to actually, that's a good advice for startups. You have to learn to talk to those people. Like the way I'm talking to you, and I know we're online, but we're kind of like in
or you have to understand what he means when he says right, because you're saying here the dynamics is a bit different.
Yeah, but I would tell you in a very polite way, is that like, you request a meeting, you request a coffee, or you request some time, you ask for advice. You ask simple advice are like, this is the problem I'm solving. This is how I think I can add value to your organization. Who should I talk to, for example? Simple thing. And ideally, you talk to someone who's related to that line of business. You don't talk just to an innovation manager. That innovation manager is both the gatekeeper and the navigator. But many people forget that they need to be a navigator. I consider my role to be the concierge service. And I'm very proud to say it. I've been a concierge of this beautiful ecosystem over the last decade. Just connecting the right people, helping them navigate, making them go faster, waste less time. Because time is of essence when you're a startup. So the person you're talking to, in a very polite way, being like, hey, who should I talk to? Can you introduce me to this person? Can we have a meeting together to better understand this problem? And if that person doesn't bring you, and it doesn't necessarily mean their boss, but the person from the business line who would benefit the most of your solution, then they are wasting your time. And actually, I bring a piece of advice regarding that, because many startups as well tell me that. They're like, oh, I'm connected with Desjardins, or hey, I'm connected with Sun Life, or I'm connected with Microsoft. I'm like, well, who are you connected with? Like, Microsoft is like hundreds, if not thousands of people. Desjardins is like dozens of thousands of people. Who are you connected with? And is this person align your interest with theirs? If not, can they introduce you to the right person? And people forget that, but like, it's not about how many contacts you have within a large organization or how many meetings you have with someone, but it's actually who's the right aligned person. And if you're connected in one door and you're not feeling that the responsiveness is there, it's fine. If you still want a Desjardins, then knock at another door. And the beauty of it is that like now, in the last 5 years, for example, within Desjardins, our open innovation readiness level in a way has increased. We're more ready to work with startups. Whether through Cooperaton, we saw it this year, where actually Desjardins is sitting down with the potential startups and we want to work with them. Our Startup in Residence program went from like just working with the startup and giving them kind of like concierge service and few workshops, to now we have a $3 million fund that we can invest up to $150,000 for the startup, and a $25,000 grant to be able to work together potentially. So our readiness level is increasing. We're more capable. We're starting a fintech certificate. Well, we're starting stuff. I'm not sure I can talk about everything. But
you don't want to release everything today.
Yeah, but like what I mean is that like the organization is growing. So having their open innovation readiness level in mind is actually a good part. And this is actually a thought process that I've been working on, and we can talk about that in another discussion. But this is important for the startup to know that open innovation readiness level of that large organization before opening the door. Because there is a huge open innovation circus happening. And it is happening. Because a lot of people are being paid to just talk, which paradoxically, literally what I'm doing right now. But I like paradoxes, that they are beautiful. So you have to be careful in knowing who your interlocutor is and who you are talking to. Are they there just for the marketing aspect, which is fine. In the open innovation readiness level, it's fine having someone talking about open innovation just for a marketing purpose, for positioning, branding, whatever you call it. It's fine, it's okay. It's part of a process, and they are growing. They are going to grow through it. It's really fine. But if you want to actually get business done, then you have to aim for higher. If they're in marketing level, it's fine. Just go talk, put yourself out there, get people to know you, because the reality is managers, when they see your name in an article or they see your name in a newsletter within the organization, your name circles, and it's great. That they actually read their emails. It's fine.
Yes. Before circling back to the crowd, where we have another question, you've mentioned it, Coopératon, 40% women participants. I saw recently on LinkedIn you were one of the speakers at the MENA Women in Tech events. I saw it was all the speakers were all women, and basically you were the intruder there, and it was great to see, right? It was great to see that speakers, an event where speakers were majority women. And right now we're talking a lot about diversity and inclusion. What are your thoughts on the work that is being done and the work that still needs to be done in order to overcome that challenge?
Well, it's true. It's funny to say that I was kind of like the intruder there, or like find Charlie, whatever. But I would like hats off to this kind of organization, like Persian Women in Tech, Women of MENA in Technology. I had the chance, and like here in the Montreal chapter, Sudeh, Bahar, Sahar, etc. They're doing amazing work, I think, at creating a bubble where it's a safe zone for women in technology to join. They were Persian women in tech, now they're women of MENA in tech, and they're increasing that bubble. That's great. We need more of those safe space bubbles. We had the opportunity also to launch Queertech, that is a great organization running today, etc., etc. So like it's about women, but so it's great to create those bubbles. Now that being said, and I talked about like the two solitudes when you talk about open innovation. Same goes for diversity and inclusion. It's not just about building bubbles. You bring women, and it's great, it's very important. But again, like it's kind of like a readiness level scale. For the people who are familiar with technology readiness level, that's the same spirit. And just put like your brain into it and you'll see how you can contribute as well to increase our level on that diversity and inclusion level. It's great to have bubbles, it's very important. I'm amazed by those leaders who are contributing. But truth being said, I'm a privileged minority. I'm a man from a certain affluent background, thank you to my mom and dad who worked their asses off so that I can be where I am today. I'm from Morocco, but I'm a pretty much privileged person. And truth being said, we need more allies. We need an army of allies to rise and to raise the women in technology and really raise those minorities to shatter the glass ceiling. We really need that. We need to all work hard. And every man, whether minority or whatever, majority or whatever you call it, needs to become an ally, to inspire someone else to become an ally, to attend those Women in Tech or whatever other event. We all need to sign the pledge. And at minimum, we really need to put at least like 4 or 5 items on this pledge and work it out. You know, like going to the gym so that your body looks good or your brain looks good because it helps as well for the brain. Yeah. We need to sign that pledge. We need to put on a list of 5 items. Choose your list. Ask a woman what kind of list you should put. Me personally, I have a simple 5 list items that I try to abide by, and I hope that people can abide by them. But it's also about inspiring other allies. But for me, a simple thing, and I can give you an example almost, and we can have like a whole conversation on that. But for me, like one, enforcing proactive representation in leadership teams, as well as in conversation opportunities, whether it's a workshop, conferences, boot camp, whatnot. And I do that both on our team at Desjardins and at Montreal New Tech. Same goes for our conferences. Same goes for our like Coopératon, etc., both at leadership, etc. Second, co-create a code of conduct. Find someone who understands what a code of conduct is and create a code of conduct for the work that we do. At Coopératon, we have a clear code of conduct that we share with people, and we co-created it. And if anything, it creates the conversation. You set the table for a true conversation on diversity and inclusion. It annoys some people, and it's fine. Like, it's part of the process. Annoying people is part of the process. Don't worry, whether in innovation or in diversity and inclusion. Third, it's always reframe prejudice. We are all prejudiced. Me the first. To be honest with you, me the first. But sometimes in a conversation or a perception is prejudice. Reframe it. Take the time to reframe it. I had examples of people saying, for example, and I feel bad about saying it, but like someone is aggressive. And without diving too much into detail, because I have a bunch of examples, if you want, I can send them to you because I like to take notes of that because it reminds me that I have to change as well. But that person brought a whole conversation on aggressivity of that person, and they was like, would you say the same thing if she wasn't black? She was a woman and black. And I literally said that in a meeting, and everybody shut up. And you were like, oh shit, maybe not. And it blocked that conversation by putting the time to reframe the prejudice itself without judging, because we're all prejudiced. Fourth is highlight, discuss, and push past the imposter syndrome. We're all noticing, and we witness it, and we had experiences of imposter syndrome either for ourselves or other people. Simple example, applications. We had like a leadership team position and regular position, or like director and leadership team. More women apply for the lower position than men, and they are usually more qualified than men. And just asking this simple question, why didn't you apply for the director level? Or why didn't you apply for the leadership thing? Is it because you don't have time and commitment, or something else? Usually they show that imposter syndrome. It happened to me on March 8th last year for a Women in Tech event, where a bunch of women were on stage, and we talked about the imposter syndrome. And I'm not going to talk about the company, but the leader there, who's a woman, said that, oh, I don't discriminate. I just hire for talent. And one of the things that we did, and that I push my team to do, is to say, yes, we hire for talent, but I want all of you to work your asses up until on the resume level, the resume that we get, we have balance. If on the resume level you have balance, then hire for talent. I don't care. But don't tell me that you're hiring for talent by being passive and not proactive, by not putting the effort to fight for the imposter syndrome. And the fun part when I had this argument with the women who were on stage is that one of the speakers that were on the panel raised her hand, and she said, you know what, if I didn't have my ally husband to push me past my fourth time talking about a certain position and not applying for it, I wouldn't be on the panel today. Because he pushed me to apply, that's how I got the position. And 5, and I will stop there because that's a lot of points. But the fifth, I will do a summary of the. But the 5th point for me is really important. If you want to be a good ally, you have to interrupt the interrupter. You have to learn to be an ally hand in hand with the woman. You have to interrupt the interrupter. Double down on good ideas. How many times a woman would be interrupted by a man to continue the conversation? That sucks. You as an ally, you have to interrupt the interrupter. Double down on good ideas from minorities and women. How many times a good idea is just taken by a man and continue as if it was his or her own, or not considered because they didn't have the support. So show your support, double down on the idea, say like, hey, Marie or Natasha or Maria or whatever said this great idea, and I think it's a great idea. Show your support there. And finally, reframe ideas appropriation. Bring them back to the real owner because it happens more often than you would like. So anyway, in a nutshell, enforce proactive representation, co-create a code of conduct. At least it will bring the conversation going. Always reframe prejudice because we're all having it, and me the first. Highlight, discuss, and push past the imposter syndrome. And finally, learn to be a great ally, interrupt the interrupter, double down on great ideas, and reframe appropriation ideas.
Thank you. Thank you, Ilias. Right before we leave ourselves, last question from the Q&A section. What were the challenges of moving a huge event like Cooperaton online? How did you manage to keep people engaged? Within a 2-minute answer, if you're able.
Yeah, I will. Sorry. Yeah, I think I'm slightly passionate, but anyway. I would say it was a challenge indeed to move it, like as any other situation of moving a program and a competition online. But we were lucky. We actually pivoted very fast. We developed our own platform called Global. So you can go on cooperaton.global to check it out. And we kind of like embrace this aspect of being virtual, meaning being asynchronous. So not everything had to be on the same time zone, happening at the same time. So that was an asset. And to maintain engagement, we had people rotating online to be there, always answering, engaging with the people, etc. The good part is that it allowed us to be pan-Canadian. So we actually made this as an asset rather than a liability. And third, it was also about like creating those moments of time and space where like we would all get together during the workshops over the weekend, etc. And we engage with everyone there, having great mentors. We were lucky to have like a variety of organizations coast to coast who maintain that momentum between the participants, and that helps with the maintaining engagement. And some really interesting aspects appeared, and I will stop there so that I stay within the time. For example, we had a higher level of women participating for a simple reason. And I got some really beautiful emails answering this, thanking us in a way, and I don't mean it in a ragged, but saying, you know, I have kids, and it's allowed me to work on my own time. I have kids, and it's allowed me to work along their sides. So some people who maybe wouldn't participate in Cooperaton participated this year to do that. And the beauty of all that is today we're keeping the Cooperaton global platform year-long. So we're iterating on that, and probably there are some interesting news happening in 2021 for the entrepreneurs of Canada.
That's great. Thank you, Ilias. Just take a look if there's any other questions. I think that was it. Thank you, Ilias, for your time. I know we could have talked for another 2-3 hours, but thank you for accepting our invitation and sharing with us your experience.
Well, thank you very, very much, Cedric. Thanks for what you're doing, both here with Startup Grind and Montreal International. I think we need more ambassadors like you and people who contribute. And thanks for Mazen as well for supporting this. It was a great chat. And yeah, I think we should take like pieces by pieces. And anyway, so much to say and so much action. So thank you very much again for the invite. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you, Ilias. Thank you, everyone, for attending. We'll get back to you on our next event of Startup Grind somewhere in the month of January. We have a really cool guest that will be with us. So thank you all, and see you next time.
Thank you very much. Cheers.